Christmas dinners at my mother's house always felt less like a celebration and more like an annual appraisal, an awkward corporate meeting disguised in glittering garlands, shiny decorations, and forced smiles. Sitting around the oversized oak table that had witnessed countless family feuds disguised as polite conversation, I could already feel my anxiety climbing as my mother, Elaine, theatrically placed perfectly wrapped presents in front of each of us. My younger sister Jessica beamed with anticipation, her perfectly manicured nails tapping rhythmically on the table, while my father, Tom, sat stoically at the head, pretending to be interested in the intricacies of his wine glass rather than the drama inevitably about to unfold. My husband, Paul, squeezed my hand under the table, a gentle, reassuring pressure that said he already knew how this was going to end, though he hoped desperately he might be wrong. I flashed him a half-hearted smile, silently praying for a miracle or perhaps even a minor disaster, anything to distract from the oppressive tension thickening around us like the gravy my mother had proudly overcooked. "Let's start with Jessica," my mother announced, her voice dripping with excitement reserved exclusively for her golden child, while she handed her an elegant, carefully wrapped box. Jessica's eyes widened as she delicately pulled the bow and unfolded the shimmering silver paper, revealing an unmistakable black box embossed with a luxury designer logo that could only mean one thing: a gift Elaine had undoubtedly spent hours picking out, crafted specifically for her favorite daughter. "Oh my gosh, Mom. It's absolutely perfect," Jessica gasped theatrically, pulling the leather handbag from its plush interior and holding it high for everyone to admire. "How did you even know I wanted this?" Elaine beamed with pride, basking in the satisfaction that came with successfully affirming her status as the world's most generous mother, at least to Jessica. I fought back a sarcastic retort as I reached for my glass of wine, silently preparing myself for the inevitable disappointment that always came next. Elaine turned towards me, the brightness in her eyes dimming slightly as if remembering something she'd rather forget. Without ceremony or flourish, she handed me a significantly smaller box wrapped in gaudy paper, clearly left over from last year's festivities. "Here you go, Anna," she sighed, pushing it across the table without even bothering to make eye contact. "You don't need anything fancy." My cheeks flushed hot with a mixture of embarrassment and resentment as I slowly tore away the garish wrapping paper, fully aware that every eye in the room was fixed upon me, silently judging my reaction. Nestled inside the cheap cardboard was a single, mass-produced candle, its scent sickeningly sweet and artificial, the kind of generic gift you'd grab from a clearance bin at the local supermarket just minutes before checkout. I lifted it gingerly, forcing a neutral expression, as Jessica's sympathetic yet superior smile sliced deeper than my mother's dismissive comment ever could. Paul's grip tightened protectively around my hand, but I gently pulled away, because this time, unlike all those years before, I had come prepared. With deliberate calmness, I reached beneath my chair and brought out a crisp white envelope ID carefully kept hidden. I held it up between two fingers, drawing the attention back to myself as silence replaced the hushed whispers and pitying looks. "Actually, Mom, I have something for you too," I said, keeping my voice steady and deliberately measured, each word punctuating the growing anticipation in the room. Elaine looked surprised, maybe even skeptical, as I handed her the envelope. She cautiously opened it, her curiosity quickly replaced by shock as she pulled out the generous check inside, a lavish amount designated specifically for a luxurious, all-inclusive Caribbean vacation she'd hinted at wanting for months. "Oh, Anna," Elaine murmured, momentarily stunned into genuine gratitude. "This is unexpected." Her surprise and satisfaction were exactly the reactions I'd planned for, and the moment she began to smile, her expression shifting subtly towards self-satisfaction and smug triumph, I acted swiftly. Leaning forward, maintaining perfect eye contact, I plucked the check from her fingers and dramatically tore it in half, savoring every shocked gasp, every startled expression. In the stunned, deafening silence that followed, I leaned back slowly in my chair, an icy smile spreading across my face. Everyone stared, mouths agape, utterly speechless. I guess some things just can't be bought, I announced, the mysterious weight of my words lingering in the room, leaving my family, and especially Elaine, wondering exactly how deep my meaning ran. As soon as we left my parents' house, the bitter December air hit me like a slap, a perfectly fitting metaphor for the lingering sting of humiliation still burning hot inside my chest. I climbed silently into the car, gripping my cheap candle as if it were some tragic trophy awarded for enduring yet another of Elaine's passive-aggressive performances, my mother's subtle yet vicious way of reminding me exactly where I ranked in her hierarchy. Paul got in behind the wheel, sighing softly as he turned the key in the ignition, his eyes fixed straight ahead, clearly waiting for the precise moment to deliver the inevitable lecture or words of comfort that never seemed to help. I stared out the fogged-up passenger window at the blur of Christmas lights rushing by, each colorful sparkle highlighting memories that felt anything but joyful. Childhood had always been a carefully choreographed dance of favoritism, with Jessica forever taking center stage while I faded into the background, watching from the shadows, feeling unnoticed and perpetually unworthy. On my 9th birthday, Jessica had received an extravagant princess-themed party with a horse-drawn carriage ride through town, while my celebrations were limited to supermarket cakes with hastily scribbled icing, the kind you'd grab in a panic just before guests arrived. Even simple bedtime rituals spoke volumes. Jessica was showered nightly with gentle lullabies and tender forehead kisses, whereas my goodnights consisted merely of my mother's tired voice floating down the hallway, absent-mindedly telling me to turn off the lights and keep quiet. No amount of good grades, trophies, or achievements ever seemed sufficient to earn me even half the praise effortlessly bestowed upon my sister, whose smallest accomplishments were celebrated as monumental victories worthy of endless praise. Paul finally broke the heavy silence inside our car, glancing briefly in my direction, his voice carefully measured yet gently persuasive. "Anna, I understand why you're upset, but maybe it's time to consider making peace with your mother. Holding on to this bitterness can't be healthy for anyone involved." I scoffed quietly, rolling my eyes as resentment flared once more in the pit of my stomach, feeding off years of hurt I'd never fully addressed. Paul was always the rational one, always suggesting compromise and reconciliation, but he didn't grow up beneath the shadow of Jessica's carefully maintained perfection. He couldn't possibly understand the depth of my wounds. Still, I knew he meant well, and beneath my stubborn silence, part of me wished it could truly be as simple as he suggested. Later that night, curled up alone on our plush living room sofa, I found myself sinking deeper into my resentment, questioning every interaction I'd ever had with Elaine, replaying moments when I felt invisible, overlooked, or outright ignored. Turning toward the soft glow of Christmas lights wrapped haphazardly around our tree, I felt compelled to speak directly into the emptiness, as if someone, somewhere, might finally understand. "Have you ever felt invisible in your own family?" I asked aloud, the words hanging heavy in the silence as if the entire world were quietly listening, sharing in the pain of my isolation. "Tell me about a time you felt overlooked. I know I'm not alone." There was comfort, strange yet reassuring, in imagining others nodding along, silently recounting their own forgotten moments, their own experiences of living in someone else's shadow. With renewed determination, I began quietly devising a plan, something far more satisfying than merely tearing up a check at the dinner table. Elaine's humiliation tonight had only scratched the surface. She needed to truly understand the depth of the pain she'd inflicted, and Jessica's smug superiority needed to be shattered completely, exposed before everyone they both held dear. What better place than the upcoming charity gala my mother so proudly hosted every year, an event filled with people Elaine and Jessica endlessly sought to impress. I felt my lips curl into a satisfied smile, savoring the delicious irony of using my mother's pride and public image against her. For once, they would both experience exactly how it felt to stand helplessly by, forced to endure humiliation under the watchful eyes of their friends and acquaintances. It was harsh, perhaps, even cruel, but after a lifetime spent absorbing their silent blows, wasn't it finally my turn? My thoughts were abruptly interrupted by the soft buzzing of my phone on the coffee table, its screen lighting up in the dimness of the room, illuminating a new text message from an unfamiliar number. Curious, I leaned forward, my heart skipping with an odd mix of dread and excitement as I read the cryptic words glowing back at me. "You think Jessica has it all figured out? Maybe you should ask her about the real reason she moved back home." My breath caught sharply, mind racing to unravel what secrets Jessica could possibly be hiding, secrets tantalizing enough that even my perfectly polished sister couldn't conceal them indefinitely. The message lingered ominously, its unanswered questions stirring both anxiety and anticipation within me. Suddenly, my plans for revenge felt small compared to the explosive revelations I was sure lay just beneath Jessica's carefully crafted facade. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning endlessly with the cryptic words that had appeared on my phone screen, each sentence ringing louder with every passing hour. Whoever had sent that text clearly knew something about Jessica that my family had carefully hidden beneath years of superficial perfection. The next morning, under the harsh brightness of winter sunlight streaming through my kitchen window, I found myself anxiously sipping bitter coffee, scrolling obsessively through social media, searching desperately for any clue or inconsistency that might betray Jessica's carefully crafted public image, the flawless mask she wore effortlessly in every picture and post. At first glance, Jessica's life appeared enviably perfect. Her profile overflowed with smiling photos from upscale parties, brunches at trendy restaurants, lavish vacations to tropical islands, all carefully curated to project effortless happiness and enviable success. But now, with suspicion planted firmly in my heart, I started noticing odd details lurking just beneath the glossy surface. The expensive trip suddenly stopped several months back, replaced by posts from our mother's house, each caption casually mentioning family time or a break from the stress, subtle hints cleverly disguised as nostalgia and sentimentality. Why had I never noticed before that Jessica had quietly slipped back home, living once again beneath Elaine's protective and enabling wing? Driven by a growing sense of urgency, I dug deeper, quietly checking public records and even making a discreet call to an old mutual friend from high school, someone who had always been closely connected to Jessica's inner circle. After an awkward exchange of pleasantries, my friend finally spilled what she'd clearly been holding back, explaining hesitantly how Jessica had been drowning in debt, quietly struggling for months after her boutique business had spectacularly failed, leaving her financially devastated and humiliated. Our mother, Elaine, had stepped in discreetly to cover Jessica's losses, secretly supporting her lavish lifestyle, desperate to maintain the illusion of perfection, the precious facade my mother had always valued above truth or genuine happiness. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces began fitting together, painting a clearer, uglier picture of our family dynamics. Jessica wasn't merely favored, she was being propped up by Elaine, enabled to hide her flaws behind a carefully crafted illusion at any cost. A potent mix of anger and vindication surged through me, bitterly pleased to find undeniable proof of the cracks in Jessica's seemingly impeccable life, yet also strangely saddened by the destructive lengths Elaine had gone to maintain appearances, willing to sacrifice everything, even her relationship with me, for a manufactured perfection that existed solely in her imagination. When Jessica invited me to meet for coffee the next afternoon, I arrived determined, my heart racing with anticipation, knowing exactly how I intended to subtly confront her, carefully gauging her reactions, ready to twist every word into a subtle accusation. She was already seated, elegantly dressed, effortlessly composed, yet beneath her outward serenity, I now saw clearly the shadows under her eyes, the nervous twitch in her fingers wrapped around her designer handbag, all betraying the anxiety hidden beneath layers of expensive makeup and practiced smiles. "How are things, Anna?" Jessica began cautiously, her voice tinged with feigned friendliness, testing the waters, clearly uncertain why I'd agreed to meet after our disastrous Christmas encounter. "Oh, things have been illuminating," I replied casually, deliberately pausing, watching her eyes flicker with confusion and suspicion, a satisfying tension rapidly filling the space between us. She shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing my hidden meaning, carefully choosing her next words as she asked, "What do you mean by illuminating?" "Just interesting discoveries, you know," I continued with deceptive innocence, leaning forward slightly, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "It's fascinating how much someone can hide behind a perfect facade, especially when Mom is always there to quietly clean up the mess." Jessica's face drained of color, her composed facade visibly fracturing as panic flashed briefly in her eyes before she hastily masked it behind a tight smile. "I don't know what you're implying," she retorted weakly, her voice trembling slightly despite her attempt at confidence, desperation slowly creeping into her tone. "You don't?" I replied with mock surprise, relishing her discomfort, the power dynamics finally shifting in my favor. "Funny, I thought you'd be the expert on implications, especially given all your recent family time. How long has it really been since your boutique closed down, Jessica?" Her eyes widened, genuine shock rippling across her features, quickly replaced by anger as her carefully maintained calm finally shattered completely. "You think you know everything, Anna? You always assumed my life was easy, that I had everything handed to me. Do you have any idea what it's like trying to live up to Mom's impossible standards?" "Oh, I have plenty of ideas about living up to impossible standards," I shot back bitterly, my voice dripping with years of built-up resentment. "The difference is, I've always been forced to do it alone, without Mom secretly paying off my failures." Jessica's eyes filled suddenly with tears, her voice breaking as she desperately pleaded, "You have no idea what Mom's done for me." I froze, heart pounding painfully in my chest as her words hung heavily between us, suddenly realizing the secret she was hinting at went far deeper than mere financial troubles, hinting at something much darker, more painful, hidden beneath years of silence and lies. After Jessica's desperate words echoed through my mind, relentlessly haunting my thoughts for days, I decided the only way to find clarity was through the one family member who had always quietly observed the chaos without ever taking sides, my father, Tom. His steady presence had always been like an anchor in our stormy family seas, silently witnessing our mother's relentless pursuit of perfection and favoritism, yet never openly intervening, perhaps out of quiet resignation or his own hidden suffering. As I drove to the modest lakeside cabin where my father often retreated, searching for peace in the solitude of nature far from Elaine's relentless judgments, my stomach twisted anxiously, sensing I was on the verge of unearthing secrets I might later wish had remained buried. When I arrived, I found my father sitting quietly on the porch, lost in thought as he stared out at the still waters reflecting the gray winter sky, seemingly waiting for someone, perhaps me, to finally come and ask the questions he'd held onto far too long. He barely looked surprised when I approached him, his warm but weary smile suggesting he'd been expecting this confrontation for longer than I had even realized. "Dad," I began cautiously, my voice shaking slightly despite my attempts to steady myself, "Jessica mentioned something the other day, something about Mom, implying there's a lot I don't know. What's really going on between them?" Tom sighed deeply, visibly weighed down by years of silence, as he motioned me to sit beside him on the worn porch steps, the old wood creaking softly beneath us like it was finally ready to reveal the burdens it had carried for decades. He spoke slowly at first, carefully choosing each word, clearly aware of the emotional weight they would carry. "Anna, there's a lot your mother never wanted you to know, thinking it was her way of protecting you, protecting us all, really." I waited impatiently as he gathered his thoughts, finally continuing, his voice quietly strained with emotion. "When Jessica was about 15, she went through something extremely painful, something traumatic she swore Elaine to secrecy about, something neither of them ever intended for you to discover. It changed everything between them because your mother blamed herself deeply for what happened, convinced it was her fault that Jessica had suffered." I stared at my father in stunned disbelief, feeling as though the foundation beneath my lifelong resentment had suddenly shifted, replaced by confusion, uncertainty, and even a twisted sense of guilt. Jessica's seemingly privileged position, the excessive attention and protection from Elaine, was suddenly cast in a completely new, painfully sympathetic light. My carefully constructed image of Jessica's life being an endless series of undeserved advantages began to fracture, revealing the hidden pain and desperation behind each seemingly effortless success Elaine had quietly facilitated. But why didn't they ever tell me? I asked softly, my voice barely above a whisper, fighting back tears of frustration and sorrow. They allowed me to resent them both. For years, I could have helped, Dad. At least I could have understood. He looked at me sadly, shaking his head slowly. Elaine was terrified of your judgment, Anna. She was so focused on maintaining the image of perfection, so convinced revealing Jessica's struggles would somehow reflect badly on her as a mother, she simply couldn't bring herself to admit the truth, not even to you. And Jessica, she begged Elaine never to tell, convinced she could bury the pain deep enough that no one else would ever need to see it. I left the cabin feeling more conflicted than ever, torn violently between sympathy for Jessica and lingering resentment toward Elaine for perpetuating years of unnecessary hurt and misunderstanding. The elaborate revenge I'd been meticulously planning felt suddenly cruel and empty, yet part of me still burned with the raw wounds inflicted by a lifetime spent feeling second best. Several days later, at another tense family gathering, the air thick with carefully hidden resentment and unspoken truths, my aunt casually remarked on Jessica's prolonged dependence on our parents, her voice dripping with smug superiority. "It's rather pathetic, really," she sneered openly, glancing pointedly at Jessica. At her age, still relying so heavily on her mother's charity to keep up appearances. Before I even realized what I was doing, I felt myself stepping protectively between them, instinctively defending Jessica in a voice firm yet surprisingly compassionate. "Jessica doesn't owe explanations to anyone here," I said clearly, catching Jessica's startled yet grateful gaze, realizing how easily I'd fallen into the role of her protector, despite the tangled history between us. "We all have struggles, some just hide them better than others." The room fell silent as everyone stared at me, shocked by my unexpected intervention, no one more surprised than Jessica herself, whose eyes shone with tears she quickly blinked away. Elaine watched me intently from across the room, her expression unreadable, a complex mixture of relief, regret, and perhaps even genuine gratitude hidden beneath the polished mask she'd worn for so many years. As guests awkwardly resumed polite conversation, desperate to escape the discomfort lingering between us, Elaine quietly approached me, her eyes glistening with barely suppressed tears. Her voice trembled slightly as she leaned closer, whispering urgently, "Anna, please, can we speak privately? There's something else you desperately need to know, something far worse than what your father told you." My heart clenched painfully, dread washing over me as her words echoed ominously in my mind, forcing me to wonder just how deep our family's darkness truly ran. Elaine guided me into the quiet solitude of her bedroom, the very room I had once considered forbidden territory as a child, where whispers had always seemed louder and secrets more profound behind the heavy oak door she kept tightly shut. The silence between us was thick and suffocating, the weight of unspoken words pressing heavily upon my chest as I watched my mother sink slowly onto the edge of her carefully made bed, her posture crumbling in a way I'd never witnessed before. Her polished veneer slipping away, replaced by something heartbreakingly vulnerable. I stood awkwardly near the doorway, unsure if I wanted to comfort her or demand answers immediately, my emotions swirling in confusing loops of sympathy, anger, and relentless curiosity. Finally, Elaine lifted her eyes to meet mine, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, cutting trails through carefully applied makeup now smeared and ruined, revealing the genuine, flawed humanity she'd spent a lifetime hiding behind perfect appearances. "Anna," she began shakily, her voice strained and trembling, "there's something you deserve to know, something I've hidden for far too long. Thinking silence was better for all of us, but I realize now it's only caused more pain." I nodded cautiously, signaling her to continue, my pulse quickening as anxiety tightened its grip, dreading yet needing the truth that could either destroy or heal the fractured relationship we'd suffered through for years. Elaine took a deep breath, gathering the courage she'd always lacked before finally speaking, her words tumbling forth rapidly, as though she'd carried their heavy burden for decades and was desperate to free herself at last. When you were both still very young, barely school-aged, my own insecurities consumed me. I was constantly terrified I wasn't enough, not good enough as a mother, not good enough as a wife, and especially not good enough compared to other women around me. Your father's success and your own blossoming intelligence seemed to highlight my inadequacies rather than bringing me joy, and it tore at my confidence relentlessly. Her voice broke slightly, eyes filled with genuine regret as she pressed on, determined now to lay bare the painful truths she'd hidden even from herself. Jessica was different. She was sensitive and dependent, needing me in ways you never did, and something twisted within me. I started relying on her vulnerabilities, feeling powerful and needed in ways I never allowed myself to feel with you. Over time, it became easier to shower her with affection, to visibly prefer her presence because it satisfied some selfish emptiness inside me. Eventually, my desperate need to be valued as a mother led me down a path that deeply hurt you both. What happened to Jessica at 15, her trauma, I blamed myself, rightly so. But instead of seeking help, I buried the truth, lavishing her with attention and gifts to soothe my own guilt. I let you think you were unloved and unnoticed, Anna, simply because I couldn't bear facing my failures openly. My chest constricted painfully, absorbing the enormity of her revelation, anger and compassion wrestling fiercely within me, leaving me emotionally battered yet somehow strangely relieved. Understanding Elaine's motives didn't erase the scars she'd inflicted, but it placed our family's suffering into a clearer, tragically human context. Yet despite newfound empathy, I still felt an undeniable urge for justice, perhaps gentler now, more nuanced, but justice nonetheless. The following week, at the grand charity event Elaine meticulously hosted each year, a glittering affair filled with influential acquaintances and superficial socialites, I stood nervously at the microphone, heart pounding as I glanced briefly toward Jessica, offering her a subtle nod of encouragement. As I spoke, my words resonated warmly through the elegant ballroom, carefully weaving a narrative of strength amid vulnerability, openly praising Jessica's resilience in overcoming personal struggles hidden beneath her seemingly flawless image. Without directly blaming Elaine, I gently revealed the toxic pressure to appear perfect that our family had silently endured, subtly highlighting how destructive such demands could become, especially when appearances were valued above authenticity. A stunned silence settled over the crowd, every eye fixed intently on Elaine, whose pale face reflected genuine shock yet an unmistakable glimmer of humble understanding. To my astonishment, she rose slowly, visibly shaken yet strangely dignified, stepping forward and taking the microphone, her voice quivering with sincerity as she faced the crowd bravely. "Anna is right," she admitted openly, her gaze steady despite tears shining in her eyes. "I spent years damaging my daughters, chasing an impossible standard of perfection instead of offering them unconditional love and honesty. I publicly apologize to both of my daughters for my mistakes, and especially to Anna, whom I've deeply hurt with neglect I justified to myself as normal parental imperfection." As applause rippled tentatively through the audience, I felt strangely at peace yet undeniably raw, grateful for the acknowledgement yet uncertain if I could ever fully forgive a lifetime spent feeling unwanted and invisible. The following year slipped quickly by, bringing another tense yet hopeful Christmas gathering, this time tempered with cautious optimism and delicate attempts at reconciliation. Elaine approached me hesitantly, holding a small, modest gift wrapped simply yet beautifully, offering it with a humility she'd never shown before. "Anna, I know this doesn't make up for everything, but please, it's given with genuine love," she whispered sincerely, her eyes filled with nervous hopefulness. I hesitated, feeling the weight of years of bitterness battling against the tentative desire to forgive, my fingers hovering uncertainly above the carefully wrapped package, unsure whether accepting it would truly heal our wounds or merely mask them temporarily. As the room fell silent around us, filled with quiet anticipation, I stood frozen, torn between finally letting go of the past or continuing to carry the heavy burden of resentment I'd grown accustomed to bearing, leaving everyone, including myself, wondering what my next move would be.